Good morning. Well, it's morning here in Texas. So I'm very excited that the theme for camp is launch. I think it's very cool. I'm here in Texas, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got here. Really close to Houston, Texas, if you know anything about your Texas geography. But I think it's really appropriate because we just had one of the first spacecraft in a very long time launch from the United States with U.S. astronauts. So I think it's very cool that we are using that theme this year, and you're able to kind of learn about how God has launched things in my life. And probably one of the biggest launches is what I'm going to talk to you about today. I have been a Christian for almost 30 years. It's kind of hard to believe in October. My second birthday, the day I became a Christian, is in October. And I think about it every single year. And I also spend time thinking about all of the adventures that God has brought me through in 30 years. And so one of those I'm going to share with you today. It's probably one of the more recent. It's very much one of the more recent. Where should I start? Well, first of all, I just want to say that to launch something takes a lot of preparation. And not just by you. I don't just mean you being a good Christian and becoming a better person in the spiritual sense of the word launch, or even a launch in your life. If you think about it, when you graduate from high school, it takes a lot of years of preparation before that, and graduation is kind of a launch, right, into your adult life. Or into the next stage of life. And then when you graduate from college, it's a whole other launch, and that happens in different places of people's lives. So, but it takes a lot of years, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of patience, which is one of our main jobs as a Christian, is to be patient and to try to understand and remember that God's timing is perfect. So I want to share one particular launch. There have been a lot in 30 years, a lot of times that the Lord has prepared me for over the course of years and then launched. And sometimes the preparation time is very intense, but very short. The Lord has launched me into things. But there's always some sort of preparation. You will not be launched into something that you're not ready for if you're following Christ, although it may seem like it. So I just want to share about my launch and my family's launch. My husband and I were Christians for all of our married life. And we had been married about 20 years when this launch kind of became a thing. Part of my job was going around and working with children and families after a natural disaster, so a tornado or a flood or a hurricane. So it was just part of my job. I was there. Did that job for 9 years. And in the last disaster, I responded. That means I got ready within just a couple of days, took off to go work with children and families during the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey here in Texas, in Houston, and all over the state, but mainly in Houston. And so I deployed for 6 weeks. So I packed up everything for myself. My family was used to this lifestyle, or used to me having this job. And so I packed everything up for myself, enough for 6 weeks, and I headed to Texas, where I'd never, ever been in my life, except I was in the airport one time in Dallas. Other than that, I had never been to Texas. I'd never put feet on Texas soil before. So that was the first time that it happened, and it's kind of exciting, right? To get to go to a place you've never been before. So I was probably about in the middle of the response here in Houston, and the Lord just really started moving on my heart and having me look around and think about the culture here in Texas, to think about what my family needed at the time. My daughter was away at college, and my son was a junior in high school. And things weren't perfect. Like my son in particular, had a really hard time with school, in public schools in West Virginia, and my daughter really had too. So I suspect that some of you guys struggle with school, and some of you are also really feel like nobody hears you at school. Nobody hears your voice. You just kind of go and you kind of exist. And I will tell you, it's the most important part of your life right now. But other than church, it's the most important part of your life, other than becoming a Christian. I know lots of adults who wish that they had spent more time paying attention in school, really dug in and not paying attention to what anybody else thought. There are lots of adults who say that. So just maybe that's a little bit of wisdom stuck in there for you. It's not a lot to do with the story, other than my kids aren't perfect, and they both struggled with school in different ways. So I had been homeschooling. Wasn't a great situation, but it was better than the public school that we were dealing with at the time. So here I was deployed in Texas, homeschooling from afar. And anyway, God just had me start looking around. Houston is a very big city, probably the biggest I had been to at that time. Well, I've been to a lot of cities. But I felt suddenly very much at home, and it was a strange feeling because I'm a West Virginia girl, and I grew up in the mountains, and to be somewhere that's so flat, it's super, super flat here. If you can imagine, you have to go really far to find a hill, even just a hill, not a mountain, just a little tiny hill. So it's super flat. It doesn't look anything like home. I could say a lot of great things about Texas. Like, I love the sky in Texas because you can see for so far. And we live near a very beautiful lake. Anyway, so there was a lot that the Lord really changed my heart, and I suddenly found myself falling in love with Texas and the culture here. And it wasn't anything I expected. I expected to just go do my 6 weeks, have my adventure, launch into my adventure like I always do, and then go home. Well, about halfway through that 6-week adventure, God started dealing with my heart and saying, what if? And he does that a lot with me because he knows I like the mystery and adventure. And so he'll just kind of drop some questions in to my heart, and will get me thinking and wondering and researching. And so after some time, it was just me and God talking about, the potential for something happening in Texas. I didn't even really know what. So eventually, it was clear that I needed to start thinking really hard about whether moving here would work. And so that's a big launch. It's almost exactly 1,000 miles from where we lived in West Virginia. So almost 1,000 miles away, exactly to the dot from where we live now. And so that's pretty far, and it takes about 24 hours to make the trip. So just so you kind of know, it takes a full 24-hour day to make the trip if you drive it straight through. I mentioned it to my husband, of course, and said, hey, can you help me pray about this? So it went about a week, and I said, okay, God, just stronger, stronger, stronger. My husband really wasn't objective, but he was like, I don't know, we'll see. There was a lot to figure out. We have 2 homes in West Virginia. We have all of our family is in West Virginia, or at least on the East Coast. which Texas is in its own Midwestern, deep southern space. Texas is big enough to be its own country. So it's bigger than a lot of countries in the world and all the other states in the United States. So it's a really big place with lots of people. So anyway, so I don't know if you know, but God says to test him. So if we're not sure, God says to test him sometimes. And then you just kind of know sometimes when it's always okay to ask God questions. Always, always, always. And so I was questioning, I said, okay, God, how am I going to know for sure? This is a big move and a big commitment. How am I going to know for sure that this is something we're supposed to do? And so I knew that my son, really one of the reasons I wanted that, my mom reasons for our moving was so that my son could be in a better school. And so I said, okay, Lord, I hadn't mentioned anything to him. He was 17. It's a big move for him. And I said, okay, if I mention it to my son and his reaction, Lord, you go before me. I prayed about it for about a week. And so I called him one evening. I was in Texas. He was in West Virginia. And I said, okay, son, I want you to think about something. And so I mentioned it to him. I really didn't say a whole lot because I didn't want to influence his reaction. I wanted to really be whatever was in his heart and whatever God had prepared. So he was very excited. So, and he's not a super emotional person on the outside, but he became very emotional. And literally, I had like 2.5 or 3 more weeks at this point to stay in Texas. He called me almost every day to ask when we were going to move. It was a much bigger reaction than I ever expected. And so that was my answer. God was faithful, and he not only just let me know that my son would be okay with it, my son was over the top excited, and without really any prompting from me. So he started researching, and he started. Anyway, so that is kind of part of the journey. Another really important part, again, the work that we had done up to this point to be ready was really important, like learning to trust God with small things and with bigger things. And through 20 years of marriage and lots of changes and lots of good things and lots of bad things. Good things can stress you just like bad things. So this was a good move. It's a good thing, but it was a lot of stress involved. And I really wasn't sure how the other people in my family would deal with the stress, but God really took care of things. We made decisions and did things like quicker than we'd ever done in our lives, and God just paved the way completely, even down to the trip where we physically put everything in the cars, everything in the truck, and made the physical trip. It was absolutely amazing how the grace of God just went before us. And we made the move about 3 or 4 months after that initial decision. Which is a pretty quick turnaround to move 1,000 miles. So everything hasn't been perfect. In fact, there's some things that are still just testing our faith. But there's not a day that goes by that we're not thankful that we didn't allow God to launch us. Sometimes there are those times in your life when you're walking and God is walking beside you. And sometimes there are those times where the Lord just gives you a launch, and it's very big. And it's usually very positive, almost always positive. But in those positives are trials that you have to learn to trust, because it's still stressful and there's still a lot of decisions, there's still a lot of unknowns. But I can't tell you how often we look at each other, and my husband and I, and we just are thankful that we were able to let go of the earth, let go of the launch pad, and allow God to launch us here into Texas. So I hope this story, maybe you'll think about it at some time in your life when God challenges you and wants to launch you into something. And the truth is that there's never any point for sure if God is leading you. Psychologically, in your head, you can really know and feel pretty confident by looking around you, but until you've actually done it and you've launched, sometimes you just don't know for sure. But the reality is that God is faithful, and that He is a rewarder of those who seek Him. And if you are seeking Him in your life, He will launch you in ways that you never imagined. I can tell you some pretty crazy stories about being launched into new experiences and new things in life. Walking with Christ is an adventure every single day. There are challenges, but there are challenges if you're not a Christian, so you just as well have the promise at the end that God is always with you. If you make a mistake, He's always with you. If you make the wrong decision, He's always with you. If you don't have enough self-control, He's still with you. There isn't a moment when He's not with you, and that Christ is not standing in for you with Father God and saying, God, do the right thing. God, give them what they need. God, help them. Lord, please don't look at their sin. Look at my sacrifice. So there's never a moment that that's not happening if you're a follower of Christ. Many times, even if you haven't gotten there yet and someone is praying for you and asking Christ to come before the Father for you. But I would just say again that this is a grand adventure. This is one of, it's not one of, deciding to follow Christ turned my life a completely different direction, and in ways that you would not imagine. I didn't do a lot of drugs. I didn't, misuse alcohol a ton. By the time I came to Christ, I really was a pretty quote unquote normal person in a lot of ways, and God just kind of took His super and put it on my natural. And it's been an adventure ever since. So I hope this is helpful to you. I hope you think about it. Don't be afraid if God will not lead you wrong. We talk about God leading a lot, and sometimes it's leading, He's in front of you leading you, and sometimes He's launching you, which means there's something really big in front of you, somewhere you've never been, and you can't tell if God's there or not. You just know things are going that direction very quickly, and you're going to be in a new place, and that's okay. Because a new place, God is with you in the new place. He was with you in the old place, and I hope this has been helpful to you. The whole time, God has said He would teach us to prosper. My husband and I, that's what's been in our hearts for almost 3 years now, that He would teach us to prosper. And I think about it almost every single day, and understand now what that means a little bit better. And I'll be learning the rest of my life. So thank you.